Dear ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome back to the afternoon segment of the conference Digital Transformation of the Agricultural Value Chain, Opportunities, Challenges, and the Role of Science. As you might have experienced, we have a tiny little change in our schedule. We will hear the remarks of Oliver Jux about the results of the Track 2 section a little bit later today. It will follow the panel discussion, which will follow next. So I'm now very happy to hand over to Professor Dominic Barry, who will moderate our next point of agenda, our panel discussion. And Dominic is the director of the Vista Milk SFI Research Centre in AgTech, hosted by TGASC Ireland, which employs more than 100 scientists working across the domain areas from soil to society. And before we start the panel, I would like to highlight and encourage you, the members of the audience, to hand in questions by using the chat function, which you can see on the right side of your screen. We'll make sure that your questions will be noted and we will bring them into the discussion at the end of the debate. Please also indicate to whom you would like to address the question, if it is the case. So, Dominic, welcome. It's really great to have you with us.
Danke, Martin. Thank you. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, we have an excellent lineup here today of 6 eminent speakers. What particularly excites me about it is our stakeholders at the very end. So I'm really looking forward to listening to George and to Alexander from a stakeholder implementation perspective. So no pressure, George or Alexander. I'm not going to go through each of the speakers because you each have their own bios, but they do come from the European Commission, individual research institutes, and as I said, our stakeholders. So everybody will be allowed to speak for 3 to 5 minutes, and after which we will then take the questions, which, as Martin said, you can put in at any time, and we will go through them. So starting at the top of the list, I'd like to welcome Doris. So Doris, if you want to unmute yourself, please give us your talk.
Yes, thank you for the introduction and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, the German Ministry of Food and Agriculture and also EURAGRI, to put the important topic of the sustainable digitalization of agriculture on the agenda of this event. And most noteworthy, to bring so many stakeholders together and to jointly discuss. I think the last 2 days I have encountered a very interesting discussion, which has revealed how challenging it is to approach this topic comprehensively. It's multifaceted. From the Commission, not only I participated, but many colleagues registered. And I'm very confident that the proposals, the inspirations, and the aspects revealed on this conference will be reflected in Commission internal discussions. So from the 2 tracks, I primarily followed the track on data governance. Noteworthy, the conference called special attention of the role of science. And I think this conference revealed that the roles of science to achieve sustainable digitalization of the agriculture sector, and I'm here referring to environmentally, social, economic, sustainable digital transformation, is very essential. So research and innovation projects are already widely following interdisciplinary approaches. And for the digital transformation, not only research and innovation in techniques is needed. That was clearly revealed. We also need innovation in social innovation, capacity building, business models. We have multi-actor approaches, we have end-user orientated research, and we have also research linked to capacity building, for instance, for the farmers. But this conference called attention also to another aspect, the important role of law in the digitalization of the agriculture sector. And to consider legal aspects supplementing research is a very important aspect. And this leads us also to the role that goes beyond the stakeholders and research, but that also policymaking plays a role in the digital transformation of the agriculture sector. The discussion called the attention to the point of the status of data and the conditions of data sharing, as well as to the point of agriculture for the sector, and the role of the data for innovation and public good purposes, and to strengthen the sector's performance. Also, the contribution to the Green Deal was mentioned and pointed out by some member states, and the Commission as well. Both are relevant for achieving the performance on the digital transformation, private and public data. And here also in the context of data, science has to play a crucial role to facilitate data sharing, not only with technical solutions, as it regards interoperability, but also technical solutions as it regards achieving trust. And data sharing has also a legal dimension and subsequently, as already said, a political dimension. And that came very obvious in this context. Here I would like to point out that the Commission committed to work with member states and stakeholders in the development of an approach towards a common European agriculture data space and to take stock with the Code of Conduct of Agriculture Data Sharing by contractual agreement. Here I would highlight that DG Connect and DG Agri closely collaborate. And the conference formed for us an important input to this stock-taking experience of the Code of Conduct and the questions around data sovereignty, which was brought forward in the conference very often. The event revealed, however, that further stock-taking efforts are needed, not only stock-taking with the experience of the Code of Conduct, but also stock-taking with ongoing initiatives in the field of data pooling, data platforms, interoperability. And personally, I would like to end with that I look very forward to the forthcoming steps in stock-taking, working together with stakeholders and member states. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Doris. And also from the EU Commission, the Hungarian Ministry of Agriculture, Aniko, I'd like you to take over, please.
Thank you very much. As a policymaker, a national policymaker, I see two main challenges, and if I may say also opportunities in this area. The first one is that usually in agriculture, but what we as a policymakers are used to is that we regulate or design a subsidy policy, and then innovation and practice and services move on to solve this regulation for our farmers. But digitalization is an area and it's just the opposite. So we as regulators or subsidy program designers are just running after something which is already through innovation, through business models, is with the farmers. So they are using it. And sometimes it's even changing its form from a bus to a drone. So this is a situation as a policymaker which is very new and very challenging. And if you take seriously your role as a policymaker, which is very close to being a doctor, so the first principle is that don't make harm. If you take this principle seriously, then this area is quite challenging to follow up as a policymaker. And because of this challenge, it's very important that we had this kind of mutual learning exercises just as these last 2 days. Because if we see at other member states or other stakeholders face or experiences, then we can save a lot of trouble at national level. This is the first challenge. And the second challenge is that farming and food systems are a sector where you have a huge number of very diverse participants. And for example, we have 300,000 farmers, and like 80% of them are really small family farmers. So this is a sector where you have a lot of participants and stakeholders whose technological readiness level is not the same. But because they are producing food and they are affecting our natural resources, it's not an option as a policymaker to leave anyone behind. So you have to have a system which is fit for everyone on a very, very different stage. And in this, if I would like to paint a picture, we have a lot of Davids and a few Goliaths in this system. And you always have to stand on the David side. And it's definitely not an easy challenge for a policymaker. But again, these kind of mutual exercises where we could see a lot of good examples is very and extremely important to take note of all the different needs of our Davids. So these are my two messages as a beginning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aniko. And maybe Martin, we can write this question down for later, but what I may ask is about the learnings from the other domain areas, like the human medicine, for example. You talk about learning from everybody at the conference, who are particularly in the agri-food sphere, but are there other areas that we can learn from, and people can jump in there? Next up, representing the Wageningen, is Krin Poppe. Krin? You're on mute, Krin. Yep.
Yes, thanks. Sorry. It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many friends that I worked with over the last 10 years. It's a great conference. And there are 2 points I think that I learned and I would like to stress. One of them has to do with sustainability or climate change, biodiversity, the Green Deal. The other with the platform economy. Talking about sustainability, why are we doing this? I think I have a background in applied policy research. And I think policy has a large interest because we have this climate change ambitions, the Paris Agreement, the biodiversity problems. So it is not only in bringing new technology to farmers, but if we start regulating, as we do in the farm to fork strategy on using less pesticides, for instance, then IT can perhaps help to reduce the effects on food security, on cost prices, etc. And I think that in choosing our research projects for the future, because I think that's the discussion we have, we should very much look to that aspect. The second is, my observation is that we talked over the last 2 days a lot about data and data governance, and not so much about the platform economy. And I tend to think that platforms are more important than data. I very often use these 4 levels, the hard infrastructure, then the data, then the platforms, and then the services that run on the platforms. And in the rest of the economy, you see platforms becoming enormously important. And I think the same is happening in agriculture. And it probably makes sense also for policymakers in the discussion, also in the discussion on governance and law, to split these platforms in 2 types. On one hand, I have the impression you have these agricultural technology platforms from the dairy robots company or from John Deere or whatever, these big companies. And that is, well, mostly used by the Goliaths, to quote Aniko. This is an industrialization project where perhaps farmers become franchises, where there is a vendor lock-in, perhaps traditionally a lack of competition. And what you see governments do there is support frontier research like artificial intelligence or promote startups, because we want to see robots on solar energy instead of big tractors on and perhaps we should regulate their algorithms for sustainability. On the other hand, there are these data sharing platforms that are much more linked to farm management information systems, certification like Global Gap with accounting, that every farmer has to deal with, and that has to deal with the red tape that farmers, also the Davids, the small farms, struggle with, perhaps even more than the large ones. And there we need farm-oriented dashboards. And the dashboards, at least in the Netherlands, that are currently created are all not in the interest of farmers. They are created in the interest of the food industry or the technology suppliers, but hardly a dashboard that is usable by farmers. So I think that there is a reason also because that is if you go to eco schemes in the Common Agriculture Policy, you would like to use that type of data to regulate or to subsidize farmers. So I think policy has certainly a big interest in those data sharing platforms that more have to do with the administrative and accounting and certification issues that give farmers access to markets and subsidies than with the technology platform. So we should separate those two, I think, in our analysis and our future research. That were my observations. Thanks.
Thank you, Elkrin, and nice continuation of the David and Goliath metaphor. So next up from INRA, previously INRA, is Christian.
Yes, thank you very much, Dorak, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. This conference has been very, very rich, so it's difficult to say something original, but I will try to do so. As it has been clearly shown that digital transformation towards sustainability is providing a lot of innovation in agriculture, in the production side, and through automation, through precision agriculture, even through robotics, with possibilities of reducing the workload for the farmers, which is something very important, and also improving accuracy in the decision making. And this is very, very important to reduce the mental load. It's also it has been introduced sometime, but I think it's very, very important to underline that it gives access to information that maybe or sometimes are not accessible. So the large use of sensors and artificial intelligence is giving access to a situation, the biological situation, the biological environment, and this is going to be very helpful for in the process of decision making. It has also been underlined quite a lot that the digital issue was changing the relationship between let's say the agri-food system and the value chain and the citizens and the consumers by sharing the information. And this is all this have shown how deeply this can transform all the process. What I would like to add, it's something that I did not perceive a lot in the conference, is how this is going to change the way of running research per se. And the digital transition for research is going to be very, very strong and very deep, and we just start to see the potential of that. I would just like to mention 2 points. With the huge amount of data that are going to be accessible and more or less in real time, this is leading directly to the predictive biology. While at the moment we are very often in the we have plenty of observatories, but we have limitation in the prediction. And I don't know whether it is the end point or not, but this will lead to what is named the digital twins. So you, instead of having animal in a barn, we will have virtual animal where we can experiment a lot of stuff, and a lot of things. And when you have to cope with animal welfare, it is very important. And we will have the same for plants. And I think this is we are just at the very beginning of that. And when Donag, you mentioned the relationship, for instance, with medicine, this is clearly where they are one step further than we are. So I think that in agriculture, we are going there, and it's going to be very, very interesting for the research organizations. And the other aspect, which is, to my mind, going to be made possible thanks to the digitalization in research, is everything related with participatory research. We must, in the coming years, we will have more and more investment in that. We see all these new designs, such as living labs, that is giving more access to participatory research. But clearly, the digital issues are changing completely the possibility of setting this participatory research, with every citizen, everyone being in a position to fuel information, to fuel reaction to the research, and having a much more open exchange of knowledge, of information, either among citizens or between citizens and researchers. And I think this is going to change, again, very deeply our way of running research.
Okay, merci, Christian. And I have a question for you later. You kind of touched on it, and I know you're a geneticist like myself. But is there a fear in the research community, maybe, that we're going to see a lot of researchers moving away from pure biologists and hypothesis derivation to people that are experts in analytics that don't know what a cow or a bird looks like? They're just analyzing data. And I see this a lot of people just give me data and I'll analyze it, but I've no hypothesis. So we might come back to that one later on. We saw this in genetics, moving from statistical genetics to molecular genetics, and now moving back. So next up, George, hopefully I didn't put too much pressure on you. Being a farmer, I'm really looking forward to your interpretation of the last few days, George. Take it away.
Yes, hello all together. Thanks for the yes. Anyway, I'm very happy to be there, and let me introduce myself a bit. I'm the farmer, and I've got to handle all those conditions you think of. And I want to tell you something about my life. I live with my family and my parents in Bavaria, in the governmental district of Lower Bavaria, as we call it, Niederbayern, and it's quite hilly here. We have fattening pigs, about 1,400, and there is an initiative called with animal welfare we belong to. We run a biogas power plant with an average power production of 600 kilowatts, and we manage 125 paddocks, fields. In summary, we run 350 hectares where we grow corn, wheat, barley, canola, soybeans, ryegrass, and sunflowers. Anyway, it's very interesting for me to get forward, and the digital transformation in agriculture will transform the agriculture as we know it by now. And there is a lot of things we can do. And what I wanted to say is, what we need to do is we need local adapted farm management systems. Away from thinking just in categories. That's a big problem for us. And like farming organic or non-organic farming, I think we should go beyond that and think in smart ways and grow smart. What we want to gain in agriculture is the public appreciation. That's going to be very important for us in future. And what I try to do is we want to develop new systems in livestock farming. I think there is big potential in here, maybe with less animals, but the same turnover. For example, we've got to develop sustainable field management systems and this is why I won the Ceres Award in 2017, because I've developed a strip till soil management system where we can strip in the liquid manure and save the soil from erosion. This is a part of that what I do. And anyway, in all those tasks, digitalization will help us to develop those tasks. And I'm curious what this panel will bring us. And I hope I can keep up with you, and I'm looking forward to have a nice panel. Thank you.
Dankeschön, George. And just as one of the topics you brought up was about public appreciation and being a farmer, I guess a question I might have for you would be, would you have any issue with consumers being able to visit your farm virtually and monitor what's going on your farm? But we might come back to that later. I don't know how many questions we have already. Last but not least, we have your fellow countryman. Alexander is now next for the next 3 to 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Donning, and everyone. It's a pleasure being here. I'm Alex Duisberg. I am a lawyer at a technology law firm called Bird & Bird, and I'm here because I am also a member of the steering group of the International Data Spaces Association, which is a stakeholder initiative, a nonprofit stakeholder initiative to further the development of data spaces. And in this context, I'd like to share just a few observations and comments in regard of this 2 days conference. I found it extremely interesting. I have been advising also in the agriculture tech business for a couple of years, so I found a lot of information coming through here. Maybe a few thoughts to reflect what has been said. It is a diversified landscape. If you just look at data as such, there's much more diversification beyond that. But if we just think about the kind, the quality, the provenance of data that is here at stake, and I would add also the longevity of data, the relevance of long-term planning observation is, I think, something which is very characteristic of the agricultural business. Farmers think in decades, think in generations, in the change of the soil, in the learning from how also climate change is quite directly affecting the efficiency of their work of crop and harvest. These are things which are hugely relevant in terms of creating a framework which allows and incentivizes to share data. And I think I've heard a few concerns around that overall theme. Certainly there is a concern about data monopolization, so the role that big aggregators play, it certainly also goes in the direction of what Kreen was saying, but also on the positive side, the extreme relevance of platforms is essential for growing data business. And I'll talk about platform just in a minute from now a bit further. So there is the up and the downside of that. And the approaches that corporate organizations can take and invest can obviously also be very beneficial for growing, if you like, the agri-data business. I think there is a big, very relevant point which came through if we think about Europe overall, and it was also mentioned in the outset, the risk of the digital divide, or at least also the divide between large farmers and corporate organizations and stakeholders, and the many smaller farmers. And I think there's one key element to this which cannot be emphasized enough, which is obviously broadband access and availability. This is obviously an infrastructural element which is quintessential to make any of this happen. And I think we know that in rural areas, this is a big area of debate and also required investment and role of government, which needs to be looked at. But if we look into the overarching framework which is developing now, I think we have a clear statement coming from the EU Commission's data strategy and the emphasis on data spaces as such, and it has also clearly distilled out the agricultural sector as one of the key of the 9 sectors of focus. So it is very good that we have this on the spotlight right now already. We had yesterday in the session I was kindly invited to speak a presentation of the Data Governance Act, which I think is a very interesting piece of regulation now in debate, which looks at the roles of intermediary services. It does reiterate the necessity of data portability, so avoiding lock-in effects, enabling farmers, enabling consortia to carry away the data, to move to a free competitive environment, and also, again, the need to create and develop incentives to share data. And I would like to now come a little bit, just in a minute now, to conclude my opening statement on the role and relevance of the International Data Spaces Association and the opportunities and learnings that come out of that. The IDS, as it is called, has its roots in Industry 4.0, but it is also looking at a more generic approach, and it has already addressed agriculture. There are 4 key constituent elements to this. It is a reference architecture, which enables to connect data. There is a technology implementation, which is a data connector. There is a certification scheme to actually have actors who are trustworthy and certified. And there is a contractual ecosystem. And I think with those 4 key elements, there are prerequisites out there at the framework level which could be made use of. And when we spoke about this yesterday in our discussion, I found a great willingness and a great openness to make this a concerted effort of all stakeholders and to bring them together to discuss frameworks, template contracts, all the legal ramifications that could work well. I think there must be an emphasis on freedom of contract. There are also issues of compliance, including also data protection and GDPR. Those are things which are obviously widely discussed in other sectors as well. And I think with that, we have already many, let's say, tools and also discussion fora and also frameworks that could be actionable also for the agricultural space. And I very much look forward to discussing some of these now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. So, Martin, have we any questions?
Yes, we do have some, and I would suggest, as you also noted down some really great questions, that maybe we kick off with one of your questions and then take turns, or I will get in or hand in some questions that relate to that. And maybe just as a general note, some of the questions are dedicated to some people of you, but if others want to add to it or share further thoughts, just do it. So Dominic, yeah, maybe you kick off.
Yep. The reason I said them during the talks was because I knew I'd forget them. But I have one, and probably
I also made some notes.
Okay. I probably have one for Alexander as well. And during the last few days, Alexander, we heard a lot about coulds and mays and shoulds, but we didn't hear a lot about wills. So will we see legislation from a data perspective coming down the line, the same as GDPR? What would it look like? And so therefore, how do we need to be proactive?
Thank you. I will pick this up very briefly. So I think the wills means doing the needful, but not exaggerating. I think it was also very correctly mentioned by Aniko, there's a risk of overregulation, and we also know that the pace of innovation in the technology space is always faster than how regulation can keep up with it. So we do have, on the one hand side, a challenge, but also, if you like, a systemic opportunity to create the necessary freedom. So when we look at areas where there might be a need for regulation, it may fall into the space of GDPR, a bit more extension of being a bit more flexible in handling anonymous and pseudonymous data. This is something where we see in terms of the data economy and also the opportunities coming along with artificial intelligence, slight disadvantages and possibly roadblocks in compared also to other regions in the world. We need to work on this to make it more agile and flexible, I believe, where personal data might be more a sidekick effect than at the core of the business model, I would say. The second area is, if you like, the free flow of non-personal data and the opportunity to exchange data. I think we are seeing with the Data Governance Act an intent to open market opportunities with the approach not to overregulate, but we need to look at this Data Governance Act in a very refined manner. I do have question marks on the definition of intermediary services, because we do not want to foreclose also innovators, including directly also from the stakeholders, the farmers, who are not just on the recipient end, right? They are on the innovator end as well, to develop what will be helpful. And I pick up on Georg's remark that you need regional solutions, and these can only also come out of the regions. So we need to nurture innovation and not prevent it by overregulating.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. And again, to the audience, please ask questions. The themes that came up a lot were the issue of platforms. I think Kieran and Alex mentioned it, and also the digital divide of David and Goliath, and how do we close that one. But just go on following up on that question, or opening it up to Doris or Aniko on the regulation side of data. Maybe there's a question, Martin, is there?
Yeah, and I can, thank you very much. I can definitely add a perspective from the audience that relates to it very properly. So are there ideas in the European Commission alternative to or concerning the common European data space? So are there, for example, regional solutions?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think Alexander provided a quite good overview of the opportunities and the ambitions of the Commission as it regards the data strategy. So in general, the data strategy and, let's say, the package of legal acts, which are still in the pipeline to some extent, encourage the data sharing and making data available, be it public or private one, among others for innovation, including smaller players. And in this regard, you could have different scenarios of data sharing and data sharing mechanisms, be it now at regional level. So, for instance, Alexander mentioned, I don't want to repeat it, the mechanism of trustworthy data sharing to be facilitated through the Act of Data Governance, which is proposed or was released end of November. That offers opportunities for the different models of data sharing. And with the common data spaces, which have been proposed by the Commission, there is certainly in parallel also the ambition to have a critical mass of data and to have a data space like an internal market, but both can go hand in hand and does not exclude one each other. And maybe to mention the design of the data spaces, that is open. So you cannot directly draw one data space and say, okay, it could also be a federated platforms or a federation of platforms being linked to each other. So imagine we would have farmer cooperatives and farmer platforms, they could be linked and decide themselves and how far they interchange. So insofar, it's a common data space. It's quite abstract, I would say. And that is maybe also the challenge. And what we said as a Commission, what is important, at least for the agriculture data space, to develop it together with stakeholders and with the member states. And I think what became evident, so Alexander is a lawyer, so okay, I still have questions on the Act. What is behind it? Or also from other questions from science, we get the question, okay, how does the data space look like? How does it work? And if we would like to work with stakeholders, then we have to communicate it and to make it feasible. And I think that will be one key challenge. And I think that is also a point why it needs a little bit of time to really make it feasible and to discuss it with all parties potentially affected. Thank you.
I think, Kryn, you wanted to come in?
Well, perhaps an addition, in the sense that I think this is very good work on the data governance and the data space. But you also need practical examples, as Doris said. And why, this is just an idea, why don't we in the short time oblige all companies in the food chain to use for their invoices a UBL standard that would directly bring the marginal cost of environmental accounting and the normal accounting and certification close to zero, because you would then move to robotic accounting, and that would help enormously all the red tape for these small farmers that Annika was talking about.
Yeah, Annika?
May I come in? Because we have some national experiences. Almost all areas of invoicing, taxing, logistics, and some parts of agriculture are developing in Hungary, and it's compulsory to have online access. And so we have to have online invoices, online logistics systems, and it's done by the state, and you should do it, and we have the data. So if it's compulsory, it's a very important first step. But in the last 3 years, we see the issue behind it. Because if you have a lot of data which is compulsory taken by the state, it can help certain control mechanisms. It can lower the gray economy. But it's very important how these systems, what was the objective of these systems and how they are designed. Because, for example, when we want to use this public data to have some useful information, because data itself is not useful for a farmer, information is useful for the farmer. So if you want to do something useful for the farmers or for the researchers or for ICT companies providing services from this data, then it's extremely difficult. And it needs a lot of scientific, sometimes regulatory modification, a lot of technological modification. So, what from a national experience, what I can tell, even if technology is rapidly changing and we should run after the technology, is to have enough time and enough discussion of all of our objectives with doing a new regulation which will affect compulsory data collection. And I think member states should need time to think it over, because otherwise you have a lot of public data which is good for certain reasons, but which are very difficult to use for research or service development reasons. So private public data collection is okay, but you have to think it over before doing it to be able to do a public and then a public-private data stream. So be careful. We have some experiences that it's not very easy. And if you already have a system, a robust data collection system, then it's very difficult to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we were just talking about this public and private dimension and data governance, here's maybe a question that relates great to that. So do you have a concern relying on private contracting for data governance when there is such an inequality of bargaining power?
Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to give it a first stab if you wish. It's a very valid question. If you do have disparity of market powers, it is obviously a question that affects the overall competitive environment. I think, nevertheless, the freedom of contract is a very, very high, if you like, good in the overall ecosystem. And I would first say it takes time to actually see and recognize market distortion. And it's not just by the fact that you may have different bargaining powers, but you need to also see the effects of it. And until you actually have the trigger points, for example, for competition law to step in. I think until then, it is very important to create suitable dialogues, which from my perspective would involve the activities, for example, of farmers' associations, of discussing with the providers of technology platforms the needs and the market opportunities which are higher if you encourage greater user acceptance. Now, this may not be the example of a corporate organization which sells farming machines, but it could be that of a platform provider who knows he will only get the farmers buying into a platform if there is a good trade-off. So it's not just extracting the data from the farmer, but there's also real value going back. And that is something which needs to be thought about structurally. So contracts can do a lot. The far end of the story is if we do have market distortion, we need to look after that from a competition perspective.
Okay, Corinne, you came off mute. Did you want to comment? Yeah.
Yes. Well, in addition, I think we should realize that one of the effects of the digitalization is that it strengthens a movement in the organization of the food chain that we have anyway, that this is moving away from direct open markets to much more contracts, either with cooperatives, where the farmers are the owner, or with private companies. And you see very clearly, for instance, in the Netherlands, auctions disappeared as an open market because people want to talk about other issues than only price and volume. They want to talk about the quality of the product, the methods of delivery, etc. So a lot of things move away from direct open markets, and I think that digitalization in that sense brings contract farming much more closer than we originally thought.
Just before you come in, Martin, George had his hand up first. Yeah.
Oh, okay. As a farmer, I've got to ask a few questions because I'm not sure what we're talking about. What kind of data are we talking about? I still got a few fears about the big data problem. For example, I've got an example. There is algorithms which about plant growth algorithms, which is called plant growth. They simulate future growth and derivate fertilizer strategies. There is this simulation systems can be used to make harvest forecasts and price speculations. The data can be misused, and for the production ingredients as well. That's what I want to say. Excuse me. So I'm talking about the misuse of the production of data, and the industry knows what's going to be used, what the farmer uses, and this I think can lead to even more dependency of the industries, and this is why I think we need some rules to avoid dependencies. And I think data security is very important for me as a farmer, and no data trade, for example. And what I think would be important for me is decentralization of the big data, because my data is mine and that stays on the farm. That's what I think, and yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, the big data problem. And because we try to use in spreading fertilizer, and we're producing a lot of data, and there is a lot of people who wants to have the data, and yeah, that's the fear I've got to about that problem, and this is why I try to mention that. Thank you.
Maybe I can bring in Christian. I know your area is plant genomics, but on the area of plants, just what George talked about, using all that data about growth, fertilization, and pesticide usage, is there risks there?
When you are releasing data or giving access to data, you can do goods and you can do harm, as Aniko mentioned in the beginning. As I fully share the concern about, raised by Jörg, is the fact that some information that are released can lead to misuse or even induce bias in the decision making, and this is what George was pointing. Having access to a lot of information that we can implement in models can be very helpful for the farmers. In fact, the point is not the data per se and the technology. The technology is nothing per se. It's what we do with that, and it can be used in many, many directions. And this comes back to the question you raised to me when during the presentation, the introductions. What are the type of competencies we will need tomorrow in research? In fact, we will need competencies in data sciences, no doubt about that. But data sciences without biological data or agronomic data will be useless because you need a frame to make analysis. The only interesting issue with the huge amount of data and the artificial intelligence is that they are able to detect unknown patterns, some features that we were not able to detect because they are just out of the hypothesis we have. But if you take it from another perspective, in fact, with all the data, in fact, we are very good in reproducing what we have already seen. But it's difficult to, just by analyzing a huge amount of data, it's difficult to create something that you do not know. And in fact, this is one of the difficulty of all these research about all the work on data, is that we are very good in reproducing global features that we already know, to have much better tuning, to consolidate the models, but to take from the world where we are to create another one. It's very difficult to do this just by artificial intelligence. In fact, it's not really an intelligence, it's artificial. And so the creativity is something that that will stay in the hands of and in the brain of the researchers. And we only use the data to consolidate views, but making hypotheses is something that will only be made possible by the scientists and not by the robots or by the machines.
Very good. I know Doris just wants to come, but it's a particular point I would like to make also is I think we're on a hype curve for big data, like your own area, Christian. Gregor Mendel, back in the 50s when he learned about heritability, didn't have big data, he only had a few P's, so we need to be careful, I think. Doris, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you. I think Christian has raised an important issue, and let's say as a Commission we are also aware of it, and there are two initiatives for the post-2020 period I would like to highlight where the Commission makes a proposal to address this issue, at least partly. And first of all, under the Horizon Europe program, the Research and Innovation program for post-2020, the Commission has proposed a so-called partnership agriculture of data. And that is exactly to use agriculture data, Earth observation data, in combination with data technologies to find and harvest the potential of data and data technologies in a tailored way for the sectors, but also for agriculture policies. So that is one instrument. And under the so-called Digital Europe program, what is proposed there is to have testing and experimentation facilities for AI. And that do not stay at the level of research, but are close to innovation and bringing innovation to the end users and really testing AI-based solutions in the agri-food sector. So meaning also testing and validating AI-based solutions. And that could also help to dedicate the trust in AI-based agri-food solution technologies. So that could be, for instance, have the shape of trial farms or trial fields, and then trigger also AI-based solutions in the agriculture sector. Thank you.
Martin, Aniko just wants to come in. Is it a related question?
Yeah, it would be related to what just has been said by Doris, and maybe then we can, then Annika, then it's on your side. Just briefly, for the Commission, is there any plan to design a sectoral data regulation? And if so, when do we expect, or when can we expect a first draft, or maybe before that, an European Commission consultation?
Thank you for the question. Yes, in the data strategy, which was released early this year, so the Commission announced in the context of the Common European Agriculture Data Space that the Commission would like to take stock on the experiences gained with the Code of Conduct and Agriculture Data Sharing by Contractual Agreement, and what is important to us to work with stakeholders and member states together and see what are the lessons learned. So I think what the discussion here reflects, have multiple perspectives to be considered. And that is important. At the moment, there is no concrete proposal hidden in the Commission. What is planned and what was already announced is a horizontal act, a so-called Data Act, which will foster the co-generated data from, for instance, IoT devices and also business-to-government data. That was announced in the data strategy, and that is expected for 2021. But that follows a cross-sectoral approach, and there will be a public consultation, and I think it will be important, having in mind that it will follow a cross-sectoral approach, that the agriculture sector is very proactive, also sharing its thoughts in the public consultation on and how far it could be suitable for the agriculture sector, or also be hampering the agriculture sector, or what are the specific needs for the agriculture sector, because horizontal regulation may also indirectly affect agricultural practices. Thank you.
Aniko, did you want to come in?
Yes. First, reflecting, George, I think what you were talking about is data sovereignty, you as a farmer. I think there are two issues with it. The first of all is that whether you like it or not, a lot of data is going out from your farm. It's going out through your machine and it's seen from above, from satellites. So whether you like it or not, a lot of data is not your own anymore. So there is I think there is a way to help is not to closing down these data taps, because it's almost impossible, but to introduce someone in the system who can help, probably not you because you seem very professional, but probably more smaller farmers, to use what is already going out. And I think the next CAP has a very good tool. And we also try to learn from other countries how to do it best. It's called the AKIS, is Agriculture Knowledge and Innovation System, which provides through the CAP funding 3 tools. One is innovation, the second is digitalization, so the means to have digital developments and subsidies, and the third one I think is the most important, is advisors. So I think if we want to gain the trust of the farmer, then we have to prove that this outgoing data is useful for them. So it makes money, it makes profit at the end. And for that, we need very well equipped and knowledge-based advisors, because a lot of farmers want to do the farming part, the agronomic part. They don't want to do the accounting, the IT, even sometimes the research is difficult to persuade them. So what they do is they outsource it. If we prepare the advisors to be a sort of first step into this digital world and make it closer to the farmers, then it's probably a way to don't leave anyone behind in this process. So I think CAP has some solutions, but again, member states, it's very important to learn from each other how to do it the best way for the farmers.
Okay, Christian?
Yes, just to react on one thing shared by Jorge and Aniko. In fact, we tend to summarize or to limit the data to the private good, and Aniko used the word profit. In fact, we should also consider everything that is related to environments, for environment today and the environment for tomorrow as common good, and having some thought about data that are used for or useful for common goods could slightly change the total equation and how this is shared between the farmers and the citizens and the society, and also how to justify that there are public money coming into the story. Because I think it is very, very important, due to the huge challenge we have and what are these challenges are extremely visible in the Green Deal and the Green Deal strategy. We have huge challenges that are related to public good or common goods, such as environment, quality of water and air, biodiversity. And all these data should be clearly open, but most of these data are hosted by the farmers because farming activity is occupying most of the European environment. So I think we should think not only on data for private good, but also for common goods.
Just before Martin, Quinn, I think, had his hand up before you. I think.
Yeah, I want to underpin that point of Anniko and Christian. I'm not directly in favor that all the data goes directly, as in the Hungarian example, to the government. I think that we should work with data trusts or data cooperatives. But I think we really should separate, let's say, the technical data a bit, where farmers have shared that data for a long time. If you are in cattle breeding, then a lot of the data on the offspring of cattle is centralized. And we see that now in different areas, and you can anonymize them, etc. But the whole trust issue is about, I think, these profit data, these data on ecosystem performance, which are linked to the eco schemes probably in the Common Agricultural Policy, and where we have to help farmers. There I see George's issue of dealing with the public, and their farmers should have a data locker where they are in control, I think, on who can have access to that data. And that is not by definition tomorrow the government to penalize the farmers, but there we should find arrangements on how to do that. And probably we need their intermediaries between the individual farmer and the state as a regulator in the environment.
There is actually an interesting idea from the audience that maybe is addressing what you just said. It says, should or could so-called advisory services that have employees specializing in data handling be a bridge between farmers' data, legislation, and the use of this data? Would that be an idea? Would that be a way forward?
Anniko?
Thank you very much. This was something I was thinking about, and today in the morning, I'm also responsible for making the regulation for advisory services in Hungary, agricultural advisory services. And we had a change in regulation last year or the beginning of this year, and we decided that basic training for every support, so advisors who want to have support, is compulsory. It's not about agronomy, it's not about their specialization, but it's about how to be an advisor and certain digital skills. And it was very controversial. We had a lot of heated discussion from advisors about this, and sometimes it went up to political level. And at some point, I made a public statement that I will do this training. And if I have time to do this training, and if I think it's okay, then every advisor can do it. They cannot be more busy than someone who is working 12 hours a day. And I was just starting this training today. And the first session was about public digital tools and public digital data collection systems, and how can an advisor find them, use them, and help the farmers to find them. And the second was about private, so management softwares and different tools. And it was extremely interesting, and the questions from the other advisors were extremely interesting. So I think advisors are really a crucial link or bridge between these two words, and if we do it right, then they can help a lot for us regulators, because they are a good feedback channel, and also for the farmers. And when I was talking about profit, I was not just talking about selling the product on the market type of profit, but also how you can receive subsidies because you are sustainable. So that kind of money I was also speaking about, and that digitalization can help the farmers with that as well. Thank you.
Jörg, I think I saw your hand come up.
Yes, thank you. I've got to say something about sustainability because I think there can be big data really useful, like to increase the sustainability systems in land use and develop smart and sustainable farming systems like landscape, I call it, I don't know the word, but I call it landscape management systems to implement retreat areas for wild species, for example. And what I think of is in a second step to detect the benefits of those biodiversity hotspots, as I call them, and and then you can create categories and put them in like you want to make a biodiversity as a business model for farmers. This and sensoric to measure the success of the biodiversity efforts. That's what I'm thinking of in using data for sustainability. Thank you.
I'm not sure, Doris, do you want to comment on that? So looking at objective measures of, I guess it could be something in a CAP perspective, which you have experience in of biodiversity, but importantly, I think what Jörg is saying, change in the biodiversity or improvement and rewarding Jörg for that. Not sure, is that, no?
Yeah, I think we find already examples in the Common Agriculture Policy where we have agri-environmental measures, particularly in Bavaria, where George is coming from. We find agri-environmental schemes acknowledging, for instance, environmental benefits, which are also very specific and tailored to the local conditions. But I would like to come back to the point made by Aniko. I would strongly support the crucial role of advisors to establish the trust and the trust in systems and the trust in data sharing. So I think the capacity building at both levels, farmers to get an understanding and trust the system, but also at the level of advisors is a crucial point, and I would very much support it. Thank you.
Christian, I think you wanted to come in. Alex,
yeah.
then.
Yeah, I like very much what Jörg said, and all these environmental data are essential. In fact, there are two challenges that we have to tackle. The first is that very often with the environmental data, there is a huge time lag between the positive action that you do and the response. And this is very difficult because if Jörg, for instance, is doing something that is very, very good, it must be rewarded now, while the impact will be seen maybe in 10 years from now. So this is the first point. The second point is it is very difficult to get accurate data on the environment. For instance, measuring biodiversity is something that is very, very difficult. And especially if you want to have access to it everywhere. So we will have, there is a huge challenge to define proxies that are efficient enough so that we can measure our reaction. And this is where, to my mind, we must find the right adaptation or the right equilibrium between good data and good models. And this is the only way to make progress, because it's the model that are going to be able to figure out that what yoga is doing today is very positive for tomorrow. And again, this is getting back to the point that for making progress, we do not need only huge amount of data. We need biology or agronomy, and you need biological science at the same time.
Excellent. Alex?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to also add to what Geert was saying. And I see here a challenge of creating a balance between considering in particular the sustainability side of things and the Green Deal and the, if you like, common learning of extracting data, if you like, to the wider benefit of overall society, versus a very understandable interest in what you may call usage control, and tying back to the concept of the industrial or the International Data Spaces Association and the learnings from the industrial data space. I think we have here an additional element in regard to sustainability, in regard to biodiversity, and all those values which are, on the one hand side, a common interest, and at the same time, obviously, also a focal point of business for individual farmers. And I see a need also to develop that in a framework which is not just governed by, let's say, corporate vendors, which do have a great role, and also those who run platforms, make investments to running those platforms. But I think, in particular, also, if you like, nonprofit stakeholder organizations who would provide the technology, who would facilitate the reference architecture and the framework, and would ensure a warrant to a certain degree, if you like, equitable terms. There is huge importance, and I think this is a particular aspect of the agricultural sector in this field. And it kind of then builds also onto what you said, Christian, that it's the basis for research, and you need the big picture to kind of amalgamate big data, but you also need to have the ability to drill down deep at the individual small farmers dimension where the true benefit then shows up. And it is very complex. So I see it as something that there is a big need also for a concerted effort supported by government and stakeholders, maybe in difference to some of the more industrial areas, I would say.
Okay, Martin, we probably only have time for one question, Martin. Is there any question there in relation to the platforms? It came up a few times. Or
let me check. If you have a follow-up that suits very well, please.
No. I prefer if the audience got their questions answered.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of excitement about the work George is doing on the ground. So I would have some questions on that. But maybe that's a quick one. So I think we have time for two more questions. Maybe one for you, George. Are you the odd one out there using the new technology, or are there others maybe around you that show that this is more common and you are not the technology-driven outsider, but are there others around you in your region that are as enthusiastically about technology as you are?
Thank you for that question. Well, it's not a new topic in the in being a farmer. Like, we have an automatic feeding system for the pigs, and we run that, and which is based on databases, and we run that for the last 30 years. But now we are talking about on the field crops, and there is coming up more and more. Now we've got tractors. They can run very straight on the paddocks, driven by satellites, for example, which is coming up more and more. And then there is what's coming up is organic weed control. Like, we have invested in a hoe, which I can without any chemicals, we can reduce the weeds in the field crops, and we use a camera with that, and it's a frame which can move and the camera detects the rows, and there is coming more and more techniques up, which I like, and I think it's we are probably one of those who a bit further apart the others, but it's coming up. There is not far away from me, we've got the first field robot in sugar beets, and for the mechanical weed control as well, and it's working very successful. And the farmers go there and look at that and say, that may be a possibility for the future to develop. And this is why I'm looking, I hope that the future will grow in that system, and we can take advantages out of the digitalization.
So that are hopeful signals. Maybe Donna, if you have a final question or thought.
I can put one back to Jörg as well. I'm wondering, will this digitalization make you a better farmer or a worse farmer? So, you know, your eyes and your brain, will AI, artificial intelligence, ever be able to mimic that, where you walk through the animals and you know when they're going to get sick days before they're going to get sick?
Well, I was just talking about field crops. Now we're talking about livestock management, and I think in future, I hope so that we've got like sensors to detect animal welfare factors, and and possible species appropriate systems. I think we are in a big revolution, and the kind the system we have livestock in future will change a lot, I think, and sensors and automatic systems, management's livestock systems will take a great space in that. In that, what I think.
I guess it's kind of related to my question to Christian. Will the next generation of Jorgs not be farmers, but be, I don't know, something to do with digital? Will they understand animals, or will they be completely? Can you drive from where you live to Berlin now without Google Maps? And could your father have done it years ago? Will we become too reliant on these technologies?
That is that question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I can drive to Berlin without Google Maps. Of course I can. I think I can, and I can see. That's kind of a problem. Once we rely on the sensoric, we lose the ability to look at the things, and I think we've got to have both in future. Like, being a farmer is not just a manager of data in future. So that's what I think. But it can make decisions maybe easier, and it can look at the problems in a neutral way. Is that right to say? That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay. Martin?
So yeah, I think having an eye on the watch right here, I think as our next session starts in a bit over a minute, I think we should sadly have to come to an end. But like from our side, thank you so much for this very vivid and insightful discussion, for sharing perspective, insights, experience, and thoughts right from the work at a farm. And thank you all. And thank you also very much, Donna, for your moderation.